Welcome back for another edition of The Next Chapter, this Biz TV show that talks about all things concerning the written word. I'm your host, Fred Hughes, Amazon best-selling author. Lots happened we didn't have a show last week. Lots happened during that time period. I had to let the lovely Stephanie, my producer, have vacation. Not that I had to, she wanted it, and I said, well, sure, everybody deserves time off. So we took a week off so that Stephanie could enjoy Colorado and going around to see friends and family. And in the meantime, I just kept writing. But a couple of important things happened in my life. But before we go there, Biz TV is nice enough to let me film these shows to support both my own work and the work of other authors and editors and illustrators and publishers to support the written word. Most of the people I have on the show are not, you're not going to tune in and you're not likely to see Brandon Sanderson on my show. Those people don't need help selling their books. I like to have other lesser known people so that you can listen to their stories and listen to about their books and maybe go out and pick them up. But Biz TV helps me do the show on the Biz TV YouTube channel. So if you're watching us on there, like the show and subscribe to Biz TV. You don't only have to watch my ugly face talk about the written word. There are a lot of other great programs on the channel, covering a variety of topics that are both informative and entertaining. So hit the subscribe button and see what Biz TV can do for you. But back to what's happened in the world of Fred Hughes and Fred Hughes, the author. A couple of shows back, I mentioned that I had been nominated and was a finalist for the 2024 Imagine Awards, which is awards presented by the Imaginarium Convention, which is held in Tennessee. A couple of weeks ago, they had their convention, and as a part of that, they had the awards ceremony. And the winners in a variety of categories were announced, and I wanted to highlight a couple. Two friends of the show, both of who have been on, Bill Webb, or William Allen Webb, won for Best Anthology. Won the 2024 Imagine Award for Best Anthology. Another friend of the show, former guest, Ian McMurtry, won for Best Short Story Collection. Now, some of you may be asking the question, what's the difference between the two? What's the difference between an anthology and a collection? An anthology is a book containing multiple stories written by different authors. I mean, one author may write more than one story, but there's going to be multiple authors in the book. A collection are multiple stories, short stories written in the same book, collected into the same book, written by the same author. So Ian McMurtry won for collection, William A. Webb won for anthology, and surprisingly enough, I won for Best Science Fiction Novel of 2024 for the sixth book in my series, Prince Liberator. And don't have the award in hand. I didn't go to the convention. I had other commitments that I couldn't go. Of course, I didn't know ahead of time I was winning. Surprisingly, they didn't let me know. Or I might have figured out a way to be there. So when I get the award, I will actually have it on the show to show people. To me, it is a significant accomplishment. So I have that. So that's happened. The other thing that happened is the 9th book in my Prince of Britannia series came out. It's done very well in sales. It was the number one book in 3 science fiction subcategories: colonization, galactic empire, and alien invasion, which are 3 subcategories in the science fiction category on Amazon. So I was the number one book, not the number one new book. I was the number one ranked book in those categories. Overall, the book, I think I reached as high as like 550. I was the number 550th book in the Amazon store, and that says, wow, you're 549 books ahead of you. And that's true, but there were like 7 million books behind me. So being ranked that high is an accomplishment for me. 2 weeks, it's been 2 weeks since the book came out, and Prince Imperator is still ranked 2,000. I mean, I think I'm number 4 or number 5 in most of the categories I talked before about. So still doing very well after 2 weeks. I won't break down into how many books a day does that mean I'm selling. That borders on bragging. But the book is selling very well. And I want to thank all the fans of Britannia, even the ones who are hating on me because they did not like the ending of this book. I'm not going to put any spoilers out, but let's just say there's a favorite character that will not appear alive again in any of the Prince books or in any of the books in the Britannia series. And they were upset that I killed him off. So enough said about that. But while I'm on the subject of Imperator and a new book, one of the things I constantly talk about on this show, and I don't only talk about it on this show, I talk about it in real life when I'm talking to other authors and talking about marketing and branding. The best marketing an author can do, and I'm talking advertising, getting the word out about your books, is the next book in your series. And Prince Imperator is a perfect case in point. I didn't break out and put together slides of all the books, but I'll just say this. Prince Imperator came out, and like I said, it got the number 550 in the store. When it hit the street, there are 8 other books in the series aside from Prince Imperator. When the book hit the street, the first book in the series, call it the lead book, which is The Prince Awakens, a book that's 3.5 years old, was ranked 25,000, 30,000 in the store. Now, that's significantly higher than the 550 that this book was reached, and much higher than the 2,000 or so ranking that it is right now. But most authors would kill for a ranking of 30,000. And I'm not bragging about it, but what I wanted to point out is how the next book in the series has helped sell that book. As of this morning, 2 weeks after Imperator came out, The Prince Awakens went from being around 30,000 in the store to 4,500 in the store. That's a difference of like 30 books a day in sales. And 30 books a day at $5.99 a book is a fair chunk of money for any author. So I didn't spend any more money advertising it. It's the new book. People saw the new book, were intrigued by the new book, and decided, I want to read the rest of the books in the series. So they went back to that. The second book in the series went from around the same number, 30,000 or so, and is number 8,000 in the book today. So, and all the rest of the books are climbing. So, like I said, write your books and get them out there. Don't take forever to do it. All right, today's show, Greg Little is an author who writes for Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. He writes some quirky characters, and he's written a character, Belle, who totally intrigues me. And I've already bought the book. I've only recently met Greg, don't know anything about his work, but he he and I have already talked about this character, and I want to call her. I don't think Greg would like it. I want to call her. She's like a quirky Agatha Christie in space, except she has multiple personalities. I think it's an outstanding character, and once again, another thing that I harp on is people don't buy books for the story. People buy books and continue buying books from an author because of the character he develops. And I think this Bell character is a pretty unique person. So, after we make some money by asking you to watch commercials, we'll be back with Greg Little and talk about his books. This is the next chapter, and I'm Fred Hughes. Welcome back from the break. This is the next chapter, and as advertised, I'm pleased to welcome to the show Greg Little, one of the authors from Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing, or at least that's who he's publishing his next book with. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you, Fred. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, why don't tell the audience who Greg Little is and what do you write?
So I'm a writer of speculative fiction. We'll call it that because I've done fantasy, I've done science fiction, and I've done some horror as well. I've got three series currently. One finished epic fantasy series that I self-published. One currently running ongoing series called called Mutagen Deception that I published through Cursed Dragon Ship, and then an upcoming first book in a series. The book is Murder on the Interstellar Express. The series is Bell Begrudgingly Solves It. And that is a humorous sci-fi murder mystery set in space. And that comes out on August 13th.
And that's sort of like a Agatha Christie in space sort of
Yeah.
spin.
Structurally, it's a little bit more like "And Then There Were None" than it is
Okay.
Murder on the Orient Express. We liked the title. We liked cribbing on the title because of how the setting of the book. But it's more like someone dies, and then later someone else dies, and eventually they have to figure out who the killer is before they're next. so,
So
and our
that's an interesting concept. And is there anybody else sort of writing that style? Because it really is sort of like a traditional murder mystery, except it's got a sci-fi bent to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I would never assume or presume to know what it, comprehensively what's out there on the market. I have been looking for a story for this particular character, Belle, for a long time. The character predates the story by a number of years in my head, and I've just been sort of waiting for the right story for her. And I actually played a video game that was that sort of a style of an Agatha Christie kind of murder mystery set in space. And I said, oh, this is a fun, concept if I married this character who is extremely kind of like um, she's sort of a wrecking ball type character. She's extremely loudmouthed. Her has a very biting, sarcastic sense of humor, a very raunchy sense of humor. It's a lot like actually with the movie that just came out this weekend. It's a lot like Deadpool. If you like Deadpool, you'll like
Oh,
Belle.
so it's sort of like Deadpool. So
Yes. So she's very lazy. The last thing she ever wants to do is any sort of work. In fact, the only reason she's on this ship in the first place is she actually did her job for the first time in her career rather than just slacking off, and gets punished for it by getting sentenced to sort of serve on this colony ship that is being flown out by the sort of the plutocrats of their society. She's among a number of basically indentured servants that are going to help build this colony. And at the start of the story, or fairly early into the story, she wakes up from cryosleep to find out that she's been picked at random for maintenance detail. They're nearing the end of the journey, and there's all these maintenance issues that have been piling up. and they're randomly waking up portions of the crew while the plutocrats sleep through the journey. They're randomly waking up portions of the crew to address all these maintenance issues, and that sounds horrible to her. She does everything she can to try and weasel her way out of it, and then a body turns up, and so now suddenly it's that you there's a whole new um, element to the story.
That's an interesting aspect, though, because in my experience talking to a few writers, I mean, I'm not all encompassing knowing everyone, and I don't know anybody like Brandon Sanderson or anybody like that, but I do know quite a few authors who have been, I'll say, moderately successful. And the ones who seem to have the most success are the ones who have created an iconic character,
Mm-hmm.
like a David Weber with his Honor Harrington, or et cetera. I know you understand, and it almost sounds like that's the direction you went. You created what sounds like to me is an impressive character, and it just took you a while to create a story for her to star in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. And it's unusual for me because normally the sort of circumstance of the story is the first thing that comes up for me, be it an aspect of the setting or my stories, regardless of genre, always tend to have some sort of big reveal wherein something that the characters and by extension the reader took for granted as an aspect of this world is revealed to be incorrect, and actually there's this whole other side to things that nobody saw before, and that remains the case in this story. I won't get into too much how it differs than the things I've done before, but this is the first time I've come up with a character so much in advance of the actual story, and had the character be literally kind of knocking around in my head, being like, "Hey, when are you going to write me? When are you going to write me?" She's by far the most insistent, demanding character I've ever written, and the one that feels the most alive of any I've ever written.
So, because I had this issue with the first series I started writing, and which for me was only supposed to be a trilogy, and I just published the ninth book. So the characters took over and started driving the story, and I'm thinking that it sounds like Belle has too.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I actually originally envisioned her as a secondary character in a different story, and then as the character kind of grew in my head, she demanded more and more sort of outsized attention from me, and I think that's exactly kind of what happened. Is it became clear to me that no, this isn't a secondary character, this is a protagonist, and a very extremely flawed protagonist. Um, Very much the term anti-hero is probably overused, but I think some of that probably applies to her. And she's unusual in other ways too. She's a fully we don't even really have a term for what she is. She is a human being who has fully 100% replaced her biological components with cybernetic ones, up to and including her brain. And so she is a cyborg, but without the org.
Right, so she's
Yeah,
literally a robot. It almost sounds like you'd say she's a robot that had her memory or experience implanted into the robot.
yeah. There's definitely, you could say that. She would get really mad at you if you said
Oh, okay.
that.
Yeah, because she's
But
still a human. She still thinks she's a human being.
yeah, yeah, and and part of the fun of the series, part of what my editor fell in love with in terms of being in her head, is that she has, because her brain is sort of piecemeal replaced little by little by these different modules that approximated what it was doing. She'll have arguments with these portions of her brain that like the math portion of her brain that always is trying to calculate everything, that she gets mad at because she hates math, and so she starves it of numbers as a matter of principle. And there's various parts of her brain that will sort of shoulder their way into her thoughts, that she'll, and they're not saying words, it's more like they're doing things or acting in certain ways, kind of not, or almost against her will, and she gets very annoyed by this. Belle being annoyed is very
Well, after the break, we'll come back and talk more about Belle because I find her interesting. This is Fred Hughes, and this is the next chapter. Welcome back to the next chapter. I'm Fred Hughes, and we're talking to Greg Little, and we were talking about his protagonist in his new book, Belle, who is a confused sort of android with, it sounds like multiple personality conflicts.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's more just like she has aspects of her personality that get a little bit in her face about things, whether she likes it or not.
Well, I'm intrigued, and while during the break, while Stephanie was getting stuff set up for this session, I already pre-ordered the book because
Oh, thank you.
I am totally interested in this because I love characters, and Belle sounds like somebody I could get into reading. Um, so having said that, and having sold a book today, which is always a good thing, how did you get into writing, Greg? And how long have you been doing this?
Um, I got into so when I was growing up in the 90s, just to date myself, we were in my friend and I were in middle school. We were reading Star Wars, I guess they're expanded universe books now. Uh, and this was pre-prequels, pre-Disney, everything else. So this was all you got if you wanted more Star Wars stuff besides the original trilogy. And I just thought that, oh my God, because for a long time I'd always wanted to see the stories I loved keep going, and so I sort of make up continuations for them in my head. And so when I discovered there were Star Wars books, I'm like, oh my gosh, they can just keep going with this in books. This is great. And so my friend and I decided we were going to write our own Star Wars book. And so in between and sometimes during class, we passed around a spiral 3 subject notebook, and he would write a chapter long form by hand, and I would write the next chapter, and we would not consult with each other at all. And very quickly, as you can imagine, this became a game of let's not so much tell a good story, but like, how can I put him in the worst possible position for the next chapter that he has to write to try and get out of it? So I still have that notebook, and it's funny to flip through it sometimes, as it turned into a giant, game of one-upsmanship. But so that was when I discovered I liked writing. And then senior year in high school, I had my English teacher. She would always kind of hold up what she thought were the best examples of student writing whenever we turned it in. And at one point, I remember that all the usual suspects all throughout high school, who you would expect to be the best writers, would generally sort of win place and finish in these exhibitions of writing, so to speak. But then at one point, I remember she kind of stopped and she said, "But a dark horse candidate for the best writer in the class is Greg." And that was a very big shock to me. And that was when I realized that not only did I like writing, but at least one person thought I was good at it. So I played around with it on and off through college and after. I didn't start getting serious with it until about 2008, when I just decided I was going to finish my first book, come hell or high water. And I did, and it's terrible, and it will never see the light of day, as is the case with most authors' first books. But it proved to me that I could do it, and so I started writing my second book. And eventually I reached a point around 2015, 2014, 2015, where I written a book called Unwilling Souls, that wound up being my first published book, that I decided this is really good. I think this is worth publishing. And I poked around with traditional publishing for a bit, but then I decided I didn't want to wait around for that. So I went ahead and self-published it. And that you can see there on the left, that's the complete series cover. So that cover is for the ebook total or complete series version. But yes, that series is complete. It's 4 books long. I'm very proud of it. I think it came out really well, especially for a self-published.
That's a
Uh,
pretty good cover too, by the way.
yeah, yeah. Well, I decided if I was going to do it, I was going to do it properly. So I hired a very talented cover artist, and we went from there. But yeah, It's still a series I'm very proud of. It's an epic fantasy, which is sort of my first love in reading is epic fantasy. So it's gonna always gonna be the first thing I wrote. Once I was done with that, I kind of wanted to break from epic fantasy. I felt like I poured all my good epic fantasy ideas that I had at the time into that series, and so I needed to move on and try some science fiction mixed with horror. And so I did the I moved on into the Last Humans. Yeah.
And that is something that you published through Cursed Dragon Ship.
Yes, I met Kelly Colby at a Superstars writing seminar in Colorado Springs.
Okay, I've
Um,
been, and that's how I actually originally met Kevin and Kelly.
okay, yeah, yeah. Kelly and I happened to be on the same van pool ride from the airport, and so we got to chatting. And I did a first chapter read that they do sometimes there for the book that wound up becoming The Last Humans. And she had basically told me, look, if you ever want to publish with us, get in touch. Um, so eventually I did. It was kind of making the rounds. The book that would become Last Humans was making the rounds a couple of other places at the time when I talked to Kelly. So I wanted to make sure that had a chance to play out. And then when it came up again, I reached out to Kelly and asked if she was still interested, and she said yes. And so I sent it to her, and she read half the book, sent it back to me, and said, "I like the potential here, but you need to rewrite it." And you need to lose a third of it.
Kelly is good about that, and it's one of the tempting things she keeps trying to convince me to write for her, and for a variety of reasons I can't. But her ability as an editor, as a development editor, she's outstanding at it. And I wish I could just hire her to do that for me and publish with my current publisher. But that doesn't work that way. Anyway, but yeah, they're good people now. Are you going to do Superstars this year?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to take a look at my just my schedule and whether it'll fit. I've it's one of those things that I want to do it every year. I can't always fit it in. And last couple years, I've been doing Dallas Fan Expo to help Curse Dragon Ship sell books there in person. I figured that was a kind of a better use of the time. But it is something I'd like to get back to. It's been since I think 2019 since I've been, which is the year I met Kelly. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I working with Kelly as an editor is fantastic. She is really outstanding at identifying what is wrong with the book, and she doesn't try to push her vision of it onto you. She identifies what the issues are. She might offer a suggestion or two, but then she's like, and that's what's great for me is once I know what the problem is, usually the solution presents itself to me pretty readily. And that for me is key. It's just sometimes you're so close to the material, it's hard to see the problem. I'm sure you know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. It's like I never saw the fact that I went down this rabbit hole and it doesn't have anything to do with the story. It doesn't progress the story at all, but I wrote 3 chapters about that issue. So yeah, it's great to have a person like that can review your book. So you did 3, 4 books in that series in the second series that you wrote.
We've done 3 so far. She's got the fourth one now. There's going to be 6 ultimately.
Okay.
And the fun thing is that that series and the Bell series are in the same universe. In fact, there is a crossover point
Oh,
in book 3 of in a little bit of book 2 and book 3 of The Last Humans, where we cross over a bit with Bell's situation. And it's one of those things we worked hard to make sure that you don't have to have read one series to understand the other. But if you do read both, you'll pick up on some little Easter eggs, and it'll be fun.
well, that's,
But yeah,
I'm going to say that's outstanding. I mean, so they're both your IP,
yeah.
okay, outstanding. I'd never thought about doing anything like that. So,
I pitched it to Kelly, and she said, "Well, try it out, because basically the epilogue of the second book in The Last Humans is told from Belle's perspective. So the first, I guess, canonical appearance of her in fiction is actually in that other series. She has a very brief little epilogue, um, and it essentially uh, I wrote that from her perspective, and I said I sent it to Kelly, and I said, look, if you don't like this, I can rewrite it from a different perspective, and we don't have to worry about it. We can look at the Bell story as a completely separate thing. They don't have to be set in the same um, continuity, but it's kind of fun if they are. And she read it and she loved it, and so and she read the first draft of Murder on the Interstellar Express, and she loved that. So we went ahead and went forward with having them be connected to one another.
Now that's to me that's an interesting concept to be able to have two totally theoretically separate series, but still be able to blend them together. And I know some people that have tried something similar, where you have multiple authors writing in the same universe,
Mm-hmm.
but never the same author. So we'll come back to Greg right after the break and talk some more about what he has coming up. I'm Fred Hughes, and this is the next chapter. And we're back. Thanks for sticking around and listening to us. I'm Fred Hughes. This is the next chapter, and we're still talking to Greg Little, and he's telling us about the books that he's got coming out. So, 13th of August, your first true Bell book is going to hit the streets. What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm in a little bit of a break at this right at this moment, just because I just turned in the second Bell book. I've also got the fourth book in the Last Human series, is with Kelly for edits as well. So the goal is to do one of each series every year. So we release the Last Humans books in April, and the Bell series will be in August. um, so that's the goal for the next few years until the Last Humans wraps. As I said, we have three books out now. We're doing three more, and then we'll just see what's coming after that. I honestly, I don't have a ton of stuff that I'm thinking of. It always takes me a long time to work out an idea that I think is interesting enough to turn into a series. And so I'm so busy with the two I've got right now that I don't have a lot of spare brain space to work out new ideas. I have a little few inklings, but yeah, everything I write, regardless of genre, has always got that sort of, like I said, big kind of upending of everyone's expectations. And so those can take a while to come up with when you're as you have to work through them.
So, process of being a writer. It's Are you a plotter? Or are you a planner, or are you a pantser?
I am closer to a pantser, though I would say I'm a little bit in the middle. The I always know I can't start a book unless I know how I want it to end. So I always know the starting point and the ending point, and I generally know a few major waypoints along the way, and I will kind of discovery write my way between those waypoints. And my process is it horrifies everyone. I'll see if you're if it's true for you as well. I'll think of an interesting scene that aligns with sort of something I want to do with the book, and I'll write it, and it doesn't matter where in the book it happens. And then I'll see if that leads me to another scene. I'll do that, but I'll bounce around scene to scene all over the place, not in any particular order, until I've got enough of a structure in place that I feel like I can sort of start at the beginning of what, and then connect all those scenes. And usually in the process of that, something I wrote earlier on that seemed like a good scene will get discarded because it no longer fits with what I'm doing. But that's just how I've always done it, and it works for me. And every time I've tried to to do anything more structured than that, like an outline. I get totally dead in the water. The joy of writing for me is in those little moments of serendipitous discovery where you wrote two seemingly unrelated things and then discovered that actually these would be really good if you connected them in this way. And that's such a organic process that happens while I'm writing. If I worked all that stuff out during the outline process, I'm not sure I would then want to go write the book because all the fun part would be done.
I
If that
agree
makes
with
sense.
I no, I agree with you 100%. And I have some close author friends who are hardcore planners, and they'll spend a month planning and plotting out the whole book. And I'm going, well, what's the adventure in that? I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
where's the spontaneity when all of a sudden you're riding along and your protagonist or your antagonist all of a sudden decides, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit with your plan, so you don't write it that way, but yet it might, totally change the entire book. And I have a close friend of mine who writes multi-sci-fi, and he amazes me because he writes exactly the way you do. He gets up in the morning and a scene is popped into his head, and he'll write 2,000 words in a scene. It might be a whole chapter, it might be half a chapter, and has no clue where it's going to go in his book. But it's a good scene, so he writes it and he puts it off to the side. And after, Christ, he has a 10, 12 of these. He decides how to link them together and then fill in the gaps. And all of a sudden he has a book that's selling pretty well. And even if he doesn't use a scene, he'll find a way to work it into the next book. I mean, so it's like you never throw
Yeah.
anything away anyway.
Yeah, I've done that before too, and recycled ideas and stuff that I didn't publish that wasn't going to work, and all the way back to my very first book, first published book, Unwilling Souls. I had we'll call it a MacGuffin because that's what it was, a device in there that was fulfilling a purpose in the plot of that book, and I knew what I wanted the purpose of that device to be from when I wrote it, but what I didn't know was why that device existed in the first place. Like I knew what the purpose was in the story. I didn't know why anyone had bothered to make it. So until I was writing the second book, and then I get to the sort of critical plot element of the second book and what's actually going on behind the scenes, what compared to what our characters think is going on. And suddenly I realized, oh wait, the perfect explanation for why this thing exists is here in this book. And so I went back and double checked the first book, and I hadn't written anything in there that would contradict what I was going to use it for in the second book, so I was good to go. I could kind of repurpose
It's
it.
funny how things work out like that.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you, Greg. This is this last little bit of the show where you get to pitch yourself and tell people, where can they go to get your books. We talked about what's coming out and what's ahead for Greg Little. Where else, and tell people where they could come and see you if you're going to be at any cons or any other events, coming up here in the near future.
So yeah, you can get I'm Gregory D Little. You can get my books. I write fantasy, science fiction, horror. You can get my books on Amazon. You can get them if you get my Epic Fantasy series is wide release. My Cursed Dragon Ship series are Amazon exclusives right now, but we are moving more. We are moving to get more bookstores to carry them. I know Kelly and Kevin are working hard on that. We're in process of getting that, especially with the new series, Murder on the Interstellar Express, which comes out in August on August 13th. So coming up very soon. It's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun writing it. It makes me laugh even now going back and reading it. And I don't laugh easily. And I realize I'm just saying that I'm laughing at my own jokes, which isn't the best probably look, but the fact that they still make me laugh seems like a good sign. As far as appearances, I don't have anything firmly set up at the moment for the rest of this year. There's a good chance I'll be at Dallas Fan Expo next June. I've been doing that the last 2 years, and I always have a really good time. And then potentially GalaxyCon in Richmond next March.
Okay. Well, it's been great having Gregory on the show and learning about it. And I'm fascinated with Bell. So I've already gotten the book. So thanks for watching this week. I'm Fred Hughes, and this is the next chapter.